Slow replies kill businesses. For companies that rely on Gmail, missed or delayed responses means thousands of dollars of lost sales, frustrated customers, and negative reviews. In this video, I'll show you how to build an AI-powered Gmail agent in n8n that flips that script, giving instant, accurate answers that convert inquiries into sales. We'll scrape a company's website to build up a knowledge base, plug in a large language model, add guardrails for accuracy, and launch a rock-solid email support workflow that runs on autopilot. By the end, we'll have an agent that turns inquiries into paying customers, even while you sleep. All right, let's jump in. All right, here we're gonna jump into the demo of this Gmail agent. If you're a company or you're working with a company that does a lot of customer support through Gmail, this is gonna be helpful for you. All right, so starting in the top section here, first step, we're going to build up a knowledge base for the company that the Gmail agent can use to answer incoming emails. So that's what this first section is. We're going to get started by executing the workflow, and we're simply going to add the website and where we want everything to get saved. So for this agent, I found this website for this lawn care company. Great example of someone who could leverage this Gmail agent. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add that website, and we're also going to add the Google Drive folder ID that we want the knowledge base to get saved to. And that's going to kick off this building knowledge base step. Now this is going to kick off a number of nodes where we're going to go ahead and scrape all of the pages of that website and then use Google's Gemini 2.5 to build up a knowledge repository that's going to get saved down to Google Drive. And that knowledge repository is what the Gmail agent will use to answer incoming questions. Again, in the next portion of this video, we will break down every single node and exactly how this build is constructed from end to end. So stick around for that. Okay, so this first part has finished running, and we can see it's built up this full knowledge base that was scraped from the company's website. Essentially all their services, everything on their website that's going to be relevant to the number of questions that they're going to get. Now we have that knowledge built up that we can pass through to the Gmail agent. So the next step, let's actually show how this works. All right, so here we're in Gmail, and you can see I am a prospective customer, and I'm saying, hey there, I'm having trouble with some weeds in my front yard. Do you have any solutions that could help with this? And so I'm going to send that email off, and the Gmail agent's going to receive that email, and it's going to pass off to Gemini 2.5, which is going to use the variety of tools that it has access to try to understand, okay, what is this user saying? It's going to think through, can I help with this task? Then it's going to consult the knowledge base that we built up. Then it will log the message that it's going to send to the user, and then it will actually send the email back to the user based on the correct answer to that question. So let's let this run. Okay, so workflow executed successfully. Now if I go back to Gmail here, we can see here's the response from the Gmail agent. Hello, David. Thank you for your inquiry about the weeds in your front yard. Yes, we do offer weed control solutions. Weed control is an integral part of our comprehensive lawn care services. Yada, yada, yada. Our approach includes seasonal treatments. Fall fertilization is key step. For a specific plan tailored to your lawn's needs, we would recommend a professional evaluation. Please feel free to contact us at our phone number here. Again, all this is from the knowledge base that was scraped off their website. So now, 50 to maybe 80% of their incoming customer inquiries are going to get handled by this Gmail agent, freeing up their customer support folks to do higher level work or just have less of them. So pretty cool build with this Gmail agent. If you want to get this full n8n template for free, you can snag it in our school community. It's completely free to join, and just navigate to the n8n templates, find the video that you want to download the template for, and then you can get that for free in our community. With that, let's jump into the step-by-step build of exactly how this automation is working.
Let's first go into a brief system overview for our Gmail agent we're going to be building together here. I have this split up into two different parts, which are going to be our knowledge base builder and our Gmail agent, as shown here inside of n8n, the green and the yellow sections. Let's go through the knowledge base builder first, because this is going to be the baseline system that powers everything in our agent. What we're going to be doing first is crawling and scraping an entire website for a local lawn services company. For this test, I'm going to plug in this By the Blade company that's near my house that covers a bunch of different services we need to scrape, load, and build a full knowledge base around. After that's done, we then need to bundle all of that context together and really build out our knowledge base. So we'll go from that raw markdown and HTML scraped from the website into an organized knowledge base by using this prompt here inside of n8n. After that's done, we're then going to proceed with saving all of this information together inside a Google Doc using the Google Drive API. Once we have that knowledge base in hand, we're then able to go down to this number 2 item, which is the Gmail agent itself. This is going to get triggered by an email getting received through our connected Gmail account. So what we see here, and that's going to be the entry point into our AI agent. That information is going to get passed into the agent, and then we're going to make use of these tools that we have down below here to actually load up that knowledge base we just built, think about how we can handle solving this problem and replying to the customer inquiry, and then finally making a decision if it should send a message back to the user when applicable, or if it should do nothing and then maybe flag somebody else here at the company. At the very end of that, we're going to use this log message tool to take all of that context that was passed in and go ahead and log that here into a Google Sheet. Let's now dive into this and go through the full setup for our knowledge base builder. So I'm here inside of n8n, and the first trigger we have set up is a very simple form where we're going to take in the website that we want to scrape. In this case, it's going to be this By the Blade KC website. And then down below, we have this Google Drive folder ID, which is going to be the identifier for the Google Drive folder we want our knowledge base to get saved into. And so I have this up here already. If you go to your own Google Drive account and set this up where you want it to get saved, just go to your folder, click into it, and then copy everything you see here at the very end. That's going to be the folder ID. So we'll have that set up here. This data is already pinned, and so we're going to be able to get up and running with this first part of the automation here that is going to scrape all content from this By the Blade website. So I'll just click execute here, and so we can get that started. The first thing that's going to happen here is going to be this map URLs node, which is a simple HTTP request that is reaching out to Firecrawl's API and is using this map endpoint. If you're not familiar with Firecrawl, this is a platform that I use all the time for my web scraping operations. What it allows you to do is pass in a website or list of URLs and get back markdown content that's perfect for later manipulating and passing into LLMs. So it makes it really easy to go from URL to that content found on the website. And that's what we're going to be using today. More specifically, we're going to be using this endpoint called map first, and then this endpoint called batch scrape. Let's look at map first. What this is going to do is it's going to allow us to pass in a single URL, like our homepage here, as the input into a single HTTP request, and then it's going to give us back a list of every URL it was able to scan through and find on the website. This is super useful for large-scale scraping operations because we don't know all of the different service pages on the website, and there could be some hidden ones that we can't really see here just by clicking through. Since we want this knowledge base to be comprehensive of every service offering By the Blade offers, this is the perfect endpoint for our use case here. And so I'll come back to n8n and walk through how I set up this request. The first thing we do is use this /v2/map endpoint, just like what we showed in the docs here. We're going to come down here and set up our authentication, which is going to be using a generic credential type. We're going to specify header auth, and then I already built out my header auth credential. If you haven't set this up yet, click on Create New Credential, go over to the Firecrawl docs. We can actually come to the API reference, go to map, and then we can see here how they use header auth on their requests. So for the header name, we need to copy this authorization value here right before the colon, and we'll paste that in as name. And then for the header value, we need to use this bearer token here. And so we'll copy bearer into value, hit space, and then for the next part, we need to get our API key. So I'll go to my firecrawl.dev dashboard where it says API key. I'll just hit copy, and then we're going to be able to paste this in as our value for our full API key. Make sure you do have that space between bearer and your API key, or else this won't work. Let's move on to building out the request body. If we go back to the docs again for a map, we can see there's a couple of different parameters here, but underneath the simple case, we really just need the URL. So that's the first thing we're going to build up here. We're going to take our URL from the JSON provided before, which is going to be that form trigger. And then we're going to actually include a couple of different options. Under sitemap, I'm going to say include this because we want this to run as fast as possible. And including the sitemap just makes it easier for Firecrawl to find all of those URLs that it needs to extract. Under include subdomains, I'm specifying this as false because I don't care about some, support ticketing domain or some internal subdomain that they use. I want to keep this to just the publicly accessible pages. Maybe for your use case, this is a little bit different. And so make sure to check out the docs and go through these parameters for what you need to do to build out your own map request here. So this all looks good now, and we can see that this already ran, and we can look at the resulting output here on the right-hand side. So we have success true, that looks good, and we have this array of all the different links that were extracted from our website. So we're gonna have a ton of content here that we can work with, and we can see that we have our URL, we have the title of the page, and a brief description of what was found from that. So that all looks good to continue to the next step, which is gonna be starting our batch scrape operation. So I'll pull this up. This is going to be another HTTP request we're making into the Firecrawl API, and we're going to be using a post request to the api.firecrawl.dev, and we're going to use this /v1/batch/scrape endpoint to start a batch scrape operation. Batch scraping on Firecrawl is much like some of the other scraping endpoints they offer, but what it allows you to do is pass in a list of URLs instead of needing to make a single API call per URL that you want to process. So it's just a little bit more efficient to work this way and get this set up. Underneath my authentication, everything else is going to remain the same here as our previous request where we use that header auth and Firecrawl credential we set up from before. If I come down to the bottom here, the main next part is going to be setting up our JSON body. I'll pull this up and we can look here that we're passing in our URLs from before by using this map function. Basically, we're going to look at this links array that was returned from the previous response. We're going to use map function that is going to iterate over every single list inside this array. And then we're going to use this .url property on it to go ahead and access only that URL. We don't care about the title right now. We don't care about the description. We just want to get a list of URLs. After that's done, you can see that I have this wrapped by this JSON.stringify function. That's just something that makes it a little bit easier to ensure this resulting array is valid JSON. After that's done, we then move on to formats. We're going to tell Firecrawl that we want all of the scraped data to get returned to us in Markdown format because we don't care about all of the extra HTML characters. And I'm just going to go ahead and exclude images for now because that's not super important to our use case. We're mostly focused on that raw text content that is getting extracted from each web page on our By the Blade website. So we'll go ahead and we can see that this request was successfully made, but we don't have any data back yet. We can see success is true, we get an ID and a URL back. What we need to do next is grab onto this ID and go through this process called polling, where we're going to make a couple of requests back out to the Firecrawl API to see what's the status of this large-scale batch scrape operation. And in the middle here, you can see that we have this kind of loop set up where we're going to fetch the scrape status, we're going to check if it's completed, and decide if we want to go forward or loop back here. So that's what polling effectively is. We're going to be reaching out continuously to Firecrawl's API, get the status, and if it is complete, we're able to move on. If not, we're just going to keep looping over this until we get a valid, complete response back. Let's look at this HTTP request to see how we set that up. So this is going to be a simple GET request. And if I pull up the URL here, we're also going to be requesting back into this batch scrape endpoint from before. Instead of making a post request, like I said before, it's a GET request. And at the end here, we append on the ID value we got from our previous start batch scrape operation node. So we have that ID from here that gets passed into this fetch scrape status, and that's going to give us back any data and the status of how Firecrawl is progressing through this large scale scrape. So we can see after 10 different runs of this, I'll come to the early one. If I look at the first one, we can see that the status is still scraping. And so we'll check the status here by looking at that status, and it's not equal to completed. And so we're going to go out this false branch, wait again for 5 seconds, and then check that status one more time. And so this will complete until we get to the very end here, which is going to be our completed status is equal to true. So completed is equal to completed. We have all of our data returned in this data array, so we can see all of the markdown Firecrawl was able to extract. And so all checks are green here to proceed forward to the next step. if I jump into this, we have a simple set field node for setting our scraping result. And I'm just going to be building up a string here of all of our markdown data in a clean, easy to read format that's later going to get passed into an LLM's prompt. I'm going to say what the website URL is up top, add in a divider, and then I'm going to use another JSON mapping expression here that's going to allow us to go from this list of a large number of markdown items and all this extra metadata to a cleanly formatted single string here with the necessary metadata and with the raw markdown content. So we go from this more complex JSON object to a single string that has everything organized nicely to later get put into a LLM prompt. Let's now move on to the next section here, which is going to be executing the prompt responsible for building out our full knowledge base. So I'll go ahead and trigger this. All right, so that prompt just finished up running. Let's go ahead and jump into this to look at the output and the prompt we built out here. So on the right-hand side, if we scroll down through all the text, we can see we have this pretty detailed full knowledge base built out from all of those scraped pages we just passed in. Let's now load up this prompt and see what's going on. Like many of the other prompts we've covered, all of these prompts pretty much follow a pretty similar structure. We first define the role where, this is going to be an information architect and technical writer for a local law and service company. It's going to be receiving all of the scraped markdown content and is going to be responsible for building out a knowledge base. After that, we go into what its prime directives are, or what the LLM needs to accomplish here in order to complete this task successfully. We mentioned information integrity. We mentioned that this is optimized and organized for lawn care services. Depending on your business or niche, you may need to switch this up to be more targeted towards the type of business you're building this out for. And lastly, at the end here, we want to specify this output of this should be deterministic, meaning that every knowledge base we build should be structured and formatted extremely similarly. We then get into the input section where we break down the details of what input we're going to be passing in and then insert those scraped pages from before. And so if I come to the right side here and scroll through, we can see all of that scraped context from Firecrawl is provided inside here. We then get into our desired output format. Again, just tying into the earlier part of the prompt where we're going to make this as deterministic as possible. At the top, we have some metadata defined here, and then we break into the other required sections, required categories for law and service businesses, formatting for each page, and then getting to the bottom are some of the extra pages that just make it even more useful for an AI agent that's going to be reading this content and later analyzing and coming up with a response. If we come to the bottom, we then get into some of the other rules and constraints that the LLM needs to follow when analyzing all of these scraped pages. We want it to deduplicate data, meaning if there's extra content that was mentioned multiple times inside of the scraped pages, we don't want to repeat that in our knowledge base. We just want it to be a single source of truth. Then going into the bottom, there's some more specifics here on other edge cases that the LLM needs to handle. And finally, at the very end, we have this section where we detail and break down the quality checks that it needs to perform in order for the knowledge base to be created successfully. And so completedness, what's the integrity of the information? Meaning, is everything written to the knowledge base able to be matched back to some source material that we scraped? Traceability, expanding on that exact same context. And then at the very end, contradiction flagging. Is there any information that was synthesized into our knowledge base that contradicts what exists on our homepage? So that covers it here for the prompt. There's a lot to it here. And so make sure you join our school community for free in order to get this full prompt breakdown and everything else covered in this video. It's going to be under the n8n templates section. Just find the title of the video, and then you're going to be able to download the JSON, the prompts, and anything else we covered. Now that we have our knowledge base raw text content in hand, let's go through these last couple of steps here that are going to allow us to turn it into that text content all the way to this final knowledge base Google Doc that we see here. There is a Google Doc node, if I pull it up here, that allows us to actually go out and create a Google Doc. But the problem with this is it's a little bit tough to work with HTML and Markdown content with that node directly. And so we're going to take a little bit of a roundabout way to go forward with creating this, and so we can get all of this great formatting and links that we see here inside our final knowledge base. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you're going to be missing out on all of that formatting, and it's just going to look like extra Markdown content that is not easily readable or editable for yourself or your business as the context and knowledge evolves over time for the lawn service company. So I think it's personally worth going through these extra steps, but if formatting is not important to you, you can always add in that Google Doc node that we showcased before, where you just add this in and create a new document. Let's dive into these data cleanup steps so we can see how this works. All right, so I just finished running these last nodes here so we can step through and see what the data looks like through each transformation. The main thing here is going to be the eventual create Google Doc HTTP request that's calling into this Google API where we upload a file to the drive. So like I mentioned before, we're not using the built-in tool because we want to get this well-formatted document. The first step we have to do here is convert our markdown content into HTML. One of the output constraints we built out here was to only give us back the markdown content as the final text result. So we can know that we're going to have markdown content getting passed here as input. So we'll use this built-in markdown node that's going to allow us to convert markdown to HTML. We're going to pass in the output text from this LLM chain call, and then we're just going to output it as data here at the end. Next step here is going to be a simple set fields node where we prep a little bit of data that's going to get passed through the rest of the nodes. So we're going to set our document name. So this is just going to be knowledge base. We're going to set our HTML content as the data that was output from the previous node. And then we're going to grab our drive folder ID from the input trigger. And so if we come back here, that is going to match what we pasted into the form and match the ID of this folder we have up top here. So we're just going to do some simple field setup before we continue. The next node is going to be this code block that transforms this HTML a little bit further so we can build up the JSON body we need to pass into the Google API. This is a little bit complex, and to be all honest, this is not something I wrote out myself. This is something I found on the n8n community forums for somebody that was having this exact same problem. So highly recommend you check out the n8n forums if you're hitting specific issues with formatting. But if you download this n8n automation from our school community, you'll be able to have access to all of this. At its core, what we're going to be doing is setting up a couple of different data transformations where we take that HTML from before and get it into a format that's going to be able to be passed off as JSON to the Google Docs API. So there's some extra handling we have to do here for, metadata that gets passed in, all of the HTML styles that gets passed in, and how we add boundaries to different parts of the document. And so really it's just tweaking the data a little bit and getting it into a clean slate before giving it to the Google Drive API. Going forward, we then make our final HTTP call into the Google Docs API, and that is going to be a post request to this URL that we have outlined here. Again, this is not using a Google Doc node. We're making a straight up API call where we upload a file to our Google Drive. So scrolling down here, we're actually able to use a predefined credential type. And so make sure you have your Google Drive connection and credentials set up here from before. I'm not going to go through the setup steps right now, but definitely let me know in the comments if you would like to see that in a separate video. But if you click on create credential and then pull up the help guide here, if you click open docs, there is going to be a step-by-step guide from n8n. Coming back here into the necessary query parameters, this is going to be important that you have this included for each of your nodes. You want to specify that you're using the fields below. You set upload type to multipart. You set support all devices to true. Now moving on to the body, we're going to specify raw under this drop-down option for body content type. And then in the content type input, we need to specify this multipart / related semicolon boundary equals divider. So make sure you just have this in exactly as we do for this HTTP request call. And finally, underneath the body, if we pull this up, this is going to be that raw data we built out from the previous node that contains everything we need for this document to be well formatted. So we'll close out it there. And then finally move on to this final set result node that's going to take the response from our API call into Google Drive and is going to give us back our document ID and a direct link where we're going to go ahead and be able to view that Google document. So I'll load this up and we can see that we have our newly created and well formatted knowledge base for the By the Blade website, where we have metadata at top, table of contents, and all of those different categories we asked the prompt to write out when building out our full knowledge base. The cool thing about using Google Docs here is we can evolve this over time in an easy way for either us or our client to jump in and make tweaks to it. And so looks like here we don't have any FAQs. If that's something we want to, load in from, the company's internal docs, we can go ahead and paste that in, and then our agent is going to be able to use this as time goes on. So that's the one big advantage here of having this kind of live document that is going to be editable going forward. So that covers it here for the initial setup for our knowledge base builder. Let's now move on to part 2 of this system, which is going to be implementing the Gmail agent itself. So I'll come back to n8n here. At the very beginning, we have a Gmail trigger set up just like any other automation or agent we're building. This is going to be the entry point into the agent, and it's going to trigger any other operations that happen after that. So if I pull this up, we can see that I have this credential created where it's connecting to my Gmail account. This is super easy to make. All you have to do is click on that Create Credential button, go ahead and click on Sign In with Google, and then you're going to be able to connect to the Gmail account that will be listened to for this agent. After that, I'd like to go ahead and specify the pull time here as something that's short, so we're going to be able to get back to customer inquiries as soon as possible. This ultimately is going to depend on your requirements or the requirements for your client, so make sure you have that in mind when talking with them to be able to set up an effective system. And then the event here is, of course, going to be the default message received. And so I have this pinned here from a previous message that was loaded. And so we can see that we got this email that was sent in that says, hey, I'm having trouble growing grass. Do you have any sprinkler installs? Or do you do any sprinkler installs? And then we have some other metadata like the subject, who it's from, and of course it was sent to us. So that's what we have set up here for the trigger and entry point into our agent. The next part here is going to be a little bit higher level, and I want to cover kind of the ideal flow that I set out when building this agent. Basically, all of these tools are what our agent has at its disposal, and kind of when we receive a customer inquiry or customer question, the first thing we have to do is figure out, is this something we're going to be able to handle and actually respond to? And so what I've done, or my ideal case here, is going to be asking this agent to go ahead and load up our knowledge base for what we just built out from before. It's going to think deeply about what is in that knowledge base and about the customer's question. And then it's going to make a decision on if it should send a message or do nothing and simply log what was received to a Google Doc. And so that's kind of like the high level flow and what I would expect this agent to be able to do on a day-to-day basis for every message received. And so that is exactly what I did here when building out the full system prompt of our Gmail agent. The user prompt, pretty simple. This is going to contain, all of those details from before that we passed in, like the important metadata for the message IDs, who the sender is, the message itself, the timestamp, and what the subject is. And then the system prompt is where the bulk of the logic is specified. So when scrolling through this, there's a lot here, especially related to tools, error handling, how it needs to use those tools. But that's something that you don't actually have to write by hand. I want to show you the process I went through to build this out because I didn't type this out myself. I made use of a process called meta prompting where, from before I was explaining to you kind of the happy path case for what this AI agent should do. All I did was went to Claude, uploaded the incomplete version of this agent I was working on, and just used a dictation tool to think through at a high level everything this agent needs to do and the different considerations it needs to take into account. So all the things like first loading up the knowledge base, thinking deeply with the think tool, logging all details of what happened at the end. I just talked to this out loud while working with Claude. After that was done, it came back with this system prompt here that I was able to copy into n8n and go through the initial round of my testing. After doing some testing, I remembered that I didn't actually make any mention of the think tool in my initial prompt. And so I came down here and asked, can we actually extend this to make use of the think tool so the agent thinks deeply before taking action and plans out its steps? So it did that, and Claude came back with another prompt for me that I was just able to paste in, and my next execution of the agent, it did make use of that think tool. And so this is something I highly encourage you to get started using with when you're trying to make the V1 version of your agent prompt, because it's so much easier to let AI handle the writing and formatting and structure of the prompt and defining the tool usage than doing this by hand. And if you're still hitting a case where it's not covered, I would also encourage you to just declare what is happening with the unexpected agent behavior and see if Claude or another tool like ChatGPT is going to be able to handle that for you. It makes you work so much faster and is able to cover some of the edge cases that you may not even be thinking about. So that's my process and kind of a little secret here to how I think through building out real life agents. Here's the full prompt that I got back here exactly from Claude, and that defines everything happening here, including all of those tools that I went through before. The final thing we need to do here when setting this up is going to be configuring our tools. And so under Think, this is just the default Think tool. here on the side that I dragged in underneath our Get Knowledge Base tool. This is just the built-in Google Doc tool. So if I search this, we can see Google Doc tool appears here. And when I set this up, I'm going to be using the document resource, the get operation, and the doc ID is just going to be a hard-coded value that I mentioned from before. And so this is the output of our document ID at the very end of our build knowledge base workflow. If you paste this in, you're going to be able to always use that for the knowledge base that gets loaded for the agent's workflow. So make sure you set that up. Otherwise, this isn't going to retrieve anything and is going to error out for you. The send email tool, this is going to be the tool responsible for actually sending out a reply from our connected Google account to the person who messaged in. And so I'm using the message resource. I'm saying the operation reply because we're always going to be replying to someone who messaged in versus doing an outbound initial message. And so in order for that to work successfully, we do need to provide this message ID. I set this to be automatically defined by the model. And then under the description here, just to make this a bit more reliable, I said this is the email message ID that the customer originally sent in. Under email text, again, we're going to let the model automatically define this. And I'm going to say this is the helpful response generated and written to help out the customer with their inquiry or question. Basically, by providing that description, that text, and letting the model automatically define it, the AI agent is going to be able to take that context and fill in those properties exactly how it needs. So no manual work, not a lot of prompting we have to do, just simple descriptions of what data needs to go where. The final thing I have here is going to be the log message tool, which is a simple Google Sheets tool. So this is built into n8n. You can drag that in and then go ahead and specify this is going to be a sheet within documents resource, and we're using the append row operation. We're going to paste in the URL of the document we want to edit, which is this log we have up here. I manually defined each of the headers that are in the sheet, and once you get those headers in and have that URL loaded, n8n is going to be able to load up those headers for you. And so we can see timestamp, sender, subject matches everything that we have up here. For each of the values that get inserted into this new row, I'm going to let the model automatically define this. And so I set that value for each column on our Google Sheet and then just gave a simple description of what each column means and represents, just to give the AI agent a bit of a nudge towards how to fill this out correctly and the most reliable way possible. So timestamp, when the email was received, the sender, the subject, all pretty straightforward fields, but adding that description does make the system much more reliable. And that covers it here. The final thing to touch on is going to be the no-op operation. I decided to build it this way because there are going to be cases where our agent doesn't need to actually reply to a message. Say somebody is spamming us, or say we get some other notification to this email that isn't directly related to customer inquiries. This isn't something we want to always reply to and potentially hurt the reputation of our email. And so we know up here at the end just by default in that case. There's more prompting around this in that scenario in the system message as well. So make sure you download this template and download this prompt to see how we thought through setting that up and how we used Claude to build out this full system prompt.
All right, before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Seriously, do it, because we're gonna be breaking down all of the AI automations that we use to run all of our businesses. They're super helpful, and we're gonna break down exactly how we do them on this YouTube channel. So make sure like and then subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we publish new workflows that can make your businesses run 20 times more efficiently, just like we're seeing here at the recap and the other businesses that we're running. The other item is join our school community for free. The link's in the description. You'll be able to get this template, this automation that we just ran through in this video, completely for free. You can go to school and navigate to the video that you want, and then you can download the JSON output for the n8n automation. With that, you can upload it into your n8n, clone it, and then tune it for your business and your use cases. So like and subscribe, join our free community to get this automation for yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.